My name is Garrett Cole. The night I found Buddy, I wasn't looking for a dog. I was trying to get home before the storm got worse. The rain had started 20 minutes earlier, soft at first, then angry. By the time I turned onto Mill Creek Road, my windshield wipers were moving as fast as they could and still losing the fight. That road was always empty after dark. No houses, no streetlights, just trees, wet asphalt, and the kind of silence that makes you drive a little faster than you should. I almost missed him. A flash of golden fur appeared in my headlights. Then two eyes. Then a dog ran straight into the road. I slammed the brakes. The truck skidded. For half a second, I was sure I had hit him. When the truck finally stopped, my hands were locked around the steering wheel, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it over the rain. I sat there, frozen. Then I saw him. A golden retriever stood 10 feet in front of my bumper, soaked to the bone, shaking, but not running. He just stared at me, like he had been waiting for me. I opened the door. Rain hit me immediately. "Hey!" I called, keeping my voice low. "You okay, boy?" The dog didn't move. No barking. No growling. Just those eyes. I stepped closer. He was older than I first thought. Maybe 7 or 8. Mud on his legs. One ear scratched. Collar twisted around his neck. "You lost." At the sound of my voice, his tail moved once. Only once. That somehow made it worse. I crouched down and reached for his collar. "Easy." He let me touch him. And that's when I saw the tag. Not a phone number. Not an address. Not even a name. Just one small metal tag hanging from the collar, scratched and dull from age. One word was engraved on it. "Help." I stared at it. Rain ran down my face. The dog stared back at me. And suddenly getting home didn't matter anymore. I looked at the tag again. "Help." Maybe it was a joke. Maybe it was the name of a company. Maybe there was some perfectly reasonable explanation. But standing alone on an empty road in the middle of a storm, it didn't feel reasonable. Felt wrong. The dog took 2 slow steps toward me. Then he sat down. Just sat there. Like he had made a decision. I sighed. Yeah. I had a feeling this was about to become my problem. The dog's tail moved again. I wasn't a dog person. At least that's what I always told people. The truth was simpler. I had never stayed in one place long enough to have one. After my divorce 5 years earlier, life had become predictable. Work, home, microwave dinner, sleep, repeat. There wasn't much room in that schedule for a soaking wet golden retriever with mysterious tags. Yet somehow, 10 minutes later, he was sitting in the passenger seat of my truck. The heater blasted warm air. Water dripped onto the floor mats. The dog looked exhausted. "Buddy?" I read from the inside of the collar. Finally. A name. At least that's normal. Buddy rested his head against the seat and closed his eyes. For the first time that night, I noticed how tired he looked. Not scared. Not aggressive. Just tired. Like he'd been searching for something. Or someone. The drive home took another 15 minutes. When I pulled into my driveway, Buddy opened his eyes immediately. He looked at my small house. Then at me. Then climbed out without hesitation. "You don't even know where we are." His tail wagged. Apparently that wasn't a concern. Inside, I grabbed an old towel and dropped it on the kitchen floor. Buddy shook himself violently. Water flew everywhere. The walls. The cabinets. My shirt. I laughed despite myself. "Great. You've been here 30 seconds and already redecorating." For the first time, Buddy looked almost pleased. I dried him as best I could. Then filled a bowl with water. He drank like he hadn't seen water all day. After that, he walked through the house slowly. Living room, kitchen, hallway, every room, as if he was inspecting the place. Then something strange happened. He stopped in front of the front door, and just stood there, watching it. 5 minutes passed. Still watching. I sat on the couch. Buddy stayed by the door. 10 minutes later, he was still there, waiting, like he expected someone to walk through it. I checked local lost pet groups online. Nothing. No missing golden retrievers. No recent posts. No photos. Nothing. Which made no sense. A dog like Buddy wasn't the kind people forgot. I uploaded a picture anyway. Found this dog on Mill Creek Road tonight. Golden Retriever. Name on collar Buddy. Please contact me if he's yours. I hit post. Then waited. Outside, the storm continued. Inside, Buddy finally left the door. Relief washed over me, until I realized where he was going. Straight toward my bedroom. Absolutely not. Buddy ignored me. 30 seconds later, he was asleep beside my bed. And somehow I didn't have the energy to argue. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight pouring through the window. For a second I forgot about the dog. Then I heard snoring. Not mine. Buddy lay stretched across half my bedroom floor like he paid rent. I checked my phone. 3 missed calls. 1 voicemail. And 12 messages responding to my post. Most were useless. Wrong dog. Wrong town. Wrong owner. But one message stood out. It had arrived at 2:17 a.m. The profile picture showed a woman with dark hair and a tired smile. The message was short. Very short. That's my dog. My heart sped up. I opened it. There was another line underneath. Please tell me he's okay. I called the number attached to the message before I could overthink it. She answered on the first ring. Not the second. Not the third. The first. Like she'd been staring at her phone all night. Hello. Her voice was rough. The kind of rough that comes from crying too much and sleeping too little. Hi, I said. My name is Garrett. I think I found your dog. Silence. Then a sharp inhale. Oh my God. I heard her cover her mouth. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then she asked the question every owner asks. Is he okay? I looked down. Buddy was standing beside me, staring hopefully at the refrigerator. He seems more interested in breakfast than trauma. A small laugh escaped her. The first real sound I'd heard from her. And somehow it made me smile. That's Buddy. You sound relieved. I am. The honesty in her voice caught me off guard. She wasn't trying to sound composed. She wasn't pretending everything was fine. She just sounded grateful. Very grateful. When can I pick him up? She asked. Anytime. There was a pause. Then she said quietly, I'm leaving now. Less than 40 minutes later, a silver SUV pulled into my driveway. Buddy heard it before I did. 1 second he was lying on the living room rug. The next he was at the window, tail wagging violently, whining, excited. I opened the front door. Buddy bolted outside. The woman stepping from the SUV barely had time to close the door before he reached her. She dropped to her knees, and Buddy nearly knocked her over. I had expected gratitude, maybe tears. What I wasn't expecting was how emotional the reunion would be. The woman wrapped both arms around the dog. Buddy pressed himself against her chest. For a moment it felt wrong to even watch, like I was witnessing something private. When she finally stood, I got my first good look at her. Dark brown hair pulled into a loose ponytail. Green eyes. Gray sweater. Jeans. No makeup. No attempt to impress anyone. And somehow she was one of the most beautiful women I'd seen in years. Not because she looked perfect. Because she looked real. The kind of person who smiled with her entire face. The kind of person who looked like she'd been through something and kept going anyway. Buddy stayed glued to her side. She brushed a hand across his head. Then looked at me. For a second neither of us spoke. Then she smiled. Garrett. I nodded. Lillian. The smile grew slightly. I figured. You figured. Buddy doesn't usually trust strangers. I looked down at the dog. He trusted me. Exactly. There was something in her tone I couldn't quite place. Something curious. Like she was trying to solve a puzzle. She stepped closer. I don't know how to thank you. You already did. I haven't. You found him. She shook her head. No. You found him. For some reason, that landed harder than it should have. Maybe because nobody had thanked me like that in a very long time. Not sincerely. Not like they meant it. Buddy suddenly sat between us. Then looked from her to me. Then back to her. Almost annoyed. Lillian laughed. He's judging us. I think he's disappointed this conversation isn't about him. It usually is. We both laughed. And the awkwardness disappeared. Just like that. She glanced toward my house. Then toward me again. Can I ask you something? Sure. What was he doing when you found him? I told her about the road, the storm, the tag, the word help. Her expression changed immediately. Not dramatically, just enough for me to notice. You recognize it? I asked. She hesitated. A little too long, then smiled. Old joke. Something about that answer felt incomplete. But before I could ask another question, Buddy stood up and walked toward my front door, then sat, waiting. Again. I laughed. Looks like he wants to go back inside. Lillian stared at him, then at me, then back at Buddy. The corners of her mouth lifted. Honestly, what? I think he does. Buddy barked once, as if agreeing. Lillian laughed softly, then looked directly at me. Would you like to stay for dinner tonight? And just like that, the situation became a lot more complicated. I should have said no. A normal person would have said no. A normal person would have handed over the dog, wished her a good day, and gone back to whatever life they were living before a golden retriever almost stepped in front of a truck. Instead, I heard myself say, dinner. Lillian smiled. That's usually what people call it. I laughed. Right? Sorry. Buddy looked absurdly pleased with himself. Pointed at him. This feels like a setup. From the dog. From both of you. Lillian placed a hand over her heart. I would never manipulate a complete stranger. Buddy barked. I raised an eyebrow. Interesting timing. She laughed. And for some reason, that made saying yes much easier. At 6 o'clock, I pulled into the driveway of a small white house on the edge of town. It wasn't fancy, just comfortable. The kind of house people actually lived in. A porch swing, flower pots, wind chimes moving gently in the evening breeze. Buddy was already waiting at the window. The second he saw my truck, he disappeared. A moment later, the front door flew open. The dog charged outside like I'd been gone for 6 months. Good to see you too. His tail nearly knocked over a flower pot. Lillian appeared in the doorway. This time her hair was down. The evening sunlight caught the dark strands as she smiled. And for a second, I forgot what I was supposed to say. Hi. Very smooth. Garrett. 38 years old and still capable of sounding like a confused teenager. Hi, she said, clearly amused. Buddy pushed his head against my leg, demanding attention. As always. Traitor, Lillian said. The dog ignored her. I fed you. Still ignored. I raised you. Nothing. Buddy sat beside me. Lillian sighed dramatically. 3 days missing and suddenly I'm second place. I grinned. He's got abandonment issues. So do I. The words slipped out casually. But something changed immediately. Just for a second. A shadow crossed her face. Then it vanished. Almost too fast to notice. Almost. Dinner was surprisingly simple. Pasta. Garlic bread. Salad. No candles. No romantic setup. Just 2 people sharing a meal. Which somehow felt better. The conversation flowed easily. Work. Movies. Terrible childhood haircuts. Embarrassing first jobs. The kind of topics that slowly build comfort without either person realizing it. At one point I asked, so what do you do? I'm a graphic designer. Freelance. She nodded. Mostly. Her smile faded slightly. I also do marketing work for a company in Portland. I noticed the city immediately. Portland. Several states away. Before I could ask more, Buddy jumped into my lap. All 70 pounds of him. The conversation exploded into chaos. Lillian nearly choked laughing. Buddy. The dog looked proud. Very proud. I stared at him. You know you're not a puppy, right? Buddy disagreed. Strongly. For the next several minutes he refused to move. And somehow that became the funniest part of the evening. Hours passed faster than they should have. The sun disappeared. The porch lights came on. The conversation never really stopped. At some point I realized something strange. I wasn't checking my phone. Not once. Normally I checked it constantly. Messages. Emails. Work notifications. Anything to fill silence. Tonight there wasn't any silence to fill. And that felt surprisingly nice. Maybe too nice. Because that was exactly when I noticed them. The boxes. Stacked neatly against the far wall of the living room. 3 large moving boxes. each labeled with thick black marker. Portland. My stomach tightened slightly. I looked at them, then back at Lillian. She followed my gaze, and immediately knew what I'd seen. The smile disappeared from her face. Not completely, just enough. Enough to tell me those boxes mattered. A lot. I set down my coffee cup. You moving? The room suddenly felt very quiet. Even Buddy looked up. Lillian stared at the boxes for a few seconds, then slowly nodded. Yeah. Something told me I wasn't going to like whatever came next. Yeah. The word hung in the air between us. I looked at the boxes again. There were more than 3. I just hadn't noticed the others. One near the hallway, another beside the bookshelf, a smaller one near the kitchen counter. Suddenly they seemed to be everywhere, like evidence of something I hadn't wanted to see. When? I asked. Lillian looked down at her coffee. In about 4 weeks. For weeks. Not 4 months. Not next year. For weeks. Buddy climbed off my lap and walked over to her, resting his head against her knee, almost as if he already knew where this conversation was going. Portland's a long way from here. It is. You sound excited. A small smile appeared, then disappeared. I should be. That answer told me more than anything else could have. She wasn't excited. She was trying to be. There was a difference. A big one. I leaned back in my chair. So why go? Lillian stared out the window. For several seconds she didn't answer. Then she took a deep breath. Because I spent the last 6 years standing still. I didn't interrupt. She continued. My mom got sick. Her voice softened. Really sick. I felt my stomach tighten. I moved back here to help take care of her. Buddy remained beside her. Quiet. Almost protective. For a while everything was hospitals, treatments, appointments, and bills. She laughed softly. Not because anything was funny. Because sometimes people laugh when they're tired. You keep telling yourself it's temporary. Her eyes drifted toward the boxes. Then 1 year becomes 2. Then 3. Then 5. I knew that feeling. Not the same situation, but the same idea. One day looking exactly like the day before. Life quietly shrinking. And now? I asked. Her eyes met mine. Now she's gone. The room felt smaller. I didn't know what to say, so I said the truth. I'm sorry. She nodded. Thank you. Buddy nudged her hand. She scratched behind his ears automatically, like she'd done it 1,000 times. Maybe 10,000. The company I've been working with offered me a full-time position. Better pay. She laughed. Much better. Dream job. A longer pause. Then a nod. Yeah. There it was. The real problem. Not a bad choice. A good one. Sometimes those were harder. Because there wasn't a villain. Nobody to blame. No obvious wrong answer. Just 2 things you wanted. And no way to keep both. I stared into my coffee, trying to ignore the uncomfortable feeling growing in my chest. Because the truth was simple. I'd known this woman for less than 2 weeks. Less than 2 weeks. Yet somehow the thought of her leaving bothered me more than it should have. Much more. Lillian stood up. I should probably show you dessert before Buddy decides it's his. I smiled. That's a real possibility. She disappeared into the kitchen. Buddy remained beside me, watching. I scratched behind his ears. You couldn't have found a woman who lived closer? His tail thumped against the floor, completely unhelpful. A few minutes later Lillian returned carrying 2 plates. Apple pie. Homemade. The smell alone should have been illegal. I took 1 bite, then looked at her. Okay. She smiled. What? If the graphic design thing doesn't work out, you could sell this for a living. Her laugh filled the room. And for a moment the boxes didn't matter. Portland didn't matter. The calendar didn't matter. It was just the 2 of us. And Buddy, who was currently staring at my pie with criminal intent. The evening ended later than I expected. Later than either of us expected. When I finally stood to leave, neither of us moved toward the door immediately, which felt strange, and strangely important. Lillian walked me outside. The night air was cool. Buddy followed us onto the porch. The porch light cast a warm circle around all 3 of us. For a moment nobody spoke. Then Lillian smiled. I'm glad I lost my dog. I laughed. That's a terrible thing to say. I know. She looked down at Buddy. Don't let it go to your head. His tail wagged anyway. Then she looked back at me, and something about her expression changed. Softer, warmer, more vulnerable. I'm glad he found you. My heart did something inconvenient. Something very inconvenient. Because for the first time since seeing those boxes, I realized something. The problem wasn't that Lillian was moving. The problem was that I was starting to wish she wasn't. The next week should have been simple. It wasn't. After that dinner, something changed. Not dramatically. Not all at once. Just enough that I started noticing how often I checked my phone. How often I wondered what Lillian was doing. How often I found excuses to text her. The strange part was that I didn't have to work very hard. Because somehow Buddy always found a reason for us to meet. A few days later, I got a message from Lillian. Buddy refuses to eat. I immediately called her. Is he sick? No. Then what's wrong? I think he's being dramatic. That should have been my first warning. An hour later, I was standing in her kitchen. Buddy was lying on the floor, looking perfectly healthy. I crouched beside him. What's going on, Buddy? His tail wagged. Lillian crossed her arms. He ate breakfast. Okay. He ate treats. Good. He stole half my sandwich. I looked at the dog. The dog looked at me. Then he stood up, walked directly to his food bowl, and started eating. I stared. Lillian stared. Buddy continued eating, completely shameless. You've got to be kidding me. Lillian pointed at him. See, I think your dog is manipulating us. I've been saying that for years. Buddy finished eating, then sat proudly between us, as if he'd just solved a major problem. The worst part? He had, because neither of us wanted me to leave afterward. So I stayed. Again. And somehow that started becoming normal. Movie nights, coffee, walks through town, weekend farmers markets. None of it felt like dating. At least not officially. But it felt like something. One evening we were walking Buddy through Riverside Park when he suddenly pulled hard on the leash. What is he doing? I asked. No idea. Buddy dragged us toward a small hill overlooking the river. Then stopped. The sunset painted the water gold. The entire town glowed beneath the fading light. And for the first time all day Buddy sat still. Almost like he'd brought us there on purpose. Lillian laughed softly. I swear he plans these things. I looked at her. The sunset reflected in her eyes. And for a second I forgot the view entirely. She caught me staring. My heart immediately betrayed me. You okay? She asked. Yeah. A lie. Terrible lie. But she smiled anyway. Maybe she knew. Maybe she didn't. The dangerous thing was that I was beginning to hope she did. As the weeks passed, Portland stopped feeling like a city. Started feeling like a countdown. Every conversation reminded me. Every packed box. Every mention of her new job. Every calendar date. 23 days. Then 20. Then 18. I hated that. Not because she was leaving. Because I had no right to ask her not to. This wasn't some impulsive decision. She had worked for years to get this opportunity. Years. And who was I? A guy she'd met because her dog wandered into a storm. One Friday evening I stopped by her house after work. Buddy greeted me as usual. But Lillian looked different. Tired. Worried. Distracted. Everything okay? She forced a smile. Just packing. I wasn't convinced. Neither was Buddy. The dog refused to leave her side all evening, following her from room to room, watching her constantly. Finally, while she was carrying a box into the garage, I noticed something. She thought nobody was looking, but I saw her wipe tears from her eyes. My chest tightened. When she came back inside, I spoke quietly. Lillian. She stopped. What? Talk to me. For a second I thought she'd brush it off. Instead she looked away, then sat down. And suddenly the strong, cheerful woman I'd gotten to know over the past few weeks looked exhausted. Completely exhausted. I thought this would be easier, she admitted. I sat beside her. Neither of us spoke. Buddy rested his head on her lap. She smiled sadly. I wanted this job for years. I know. I still do. I know. She swallowed hard. Then why does it feel so wrong? For the first time since meeting her, I didn't have an answer. Because deep down I was asking myself the exact same question. For the next few seconds, neither of us spoke. The only sound in the room was Buddy breathing beside us. Lillian stared at the floor. I stared at the half-packed boxes stacked near the wall. The same boxes that had been bothering me since the night I first noticed them. Only now they felt different. More real. More dangerous. Because the closer Portland got, the harder it became to pretend this was temporary. I thought I'd be excited, she said quietly. You worked hard for this. I know. You earned it. I know. She laughed softly, a tired laugh. Then why does it feel like I'm about to lose something? My chest tightened, because I knew exactly what she meant. The problem was that neither of us was brave enough to say it out loud. Not yet. Buddy suddenly stood up, walked over to the front door, and dropped his leash at Lillian's feet. She looked down, then laughed. Seriously. The dog barked once. I smiled. He wants a walk. It's 10 o'clock. Buddy barked again, more aggressively this time, like he was tired of human nonsense. Lillian shook her head. I think he's judging us. He definitely is. 10 minutes later, we were walking through quiet streets beneath a sky full of stars. The town felt different at night. Slower, calmer. The sidewalks were almost empty. Most people were already home. Buddy trotted ahead proudly, as if he were personally responsible for bringing us together, which honestly wasn't entirely wrong. Can I ask you something? Lillian said. Sure. If Buddy hadn't gotten lost. I looked at her. She looked straight ahead. Would we have ever met? The question caught me off guard. I thought about it. The answer came surprisingly fast. No. She nodded. Yeah. A small smile appeared. Me neither. For a moment we walked in silence. Then she spoke again. That's strange, isn't it? What is? How one random thing changes everything. I looked at Buddy. The dog was currently investigating a bush with extreme seriousness. I don't think anything about him is random. Lillian laughed. And hearing that laugh suddenly made Portland feel even farther away. Which was dangerous, because it wasn't far away at all. It was getting closer every day. 2 days later, I came home from work and found a message waiting on my phone. It was from Lillian. Just 3 words. Need your help. My heart immediately started racing. Called her. She answered. What's wrong? Nothing bad. I exhaled. You're not allowed to start messages like that. Sorry. She sounded embarrassed. Then she added, I can't move the couch. I blinked. The couch? Yes. The emergency is a couch? Have you seen this couch? I couldn't help laughing. 20 minutes later, I was standing in her living room, trying to wrestle what appeared to be the heaviest piece of furniture ever created. Why does this thing weigh 600 pounds? It was my mother's. Was your mother secretly made of concrete? Lillian laughed so hard she nearly dropped a box. For the next hour we packed, moved furniture, wrapped dishes, sorted books, normal things, simple things. Yet somehow every item packed into a box felt like a reminder that this wasn't theoretical anymore. She was really leaving. When we finally finished, we collapsed onto the floor. Exhausted, Buddy immediately climbed between us, demanding attention. At least someone is happy, I said. Lillian smiled. Then her expression softened. Garrett. Yeah. Thank you. For helping. For everything. The way she said it made my chest hurt. Not because it sounded like goodbye. Because it sounded like she was preparing herself for one. And for the first time since meeting her, I realized something that terrified me. I wasn't just falling for Lillian Moore. I was already there. And if she got in that moving truck 3 weeks from now, I didn't know what I was going to do. The next 3 days were the hardest since I'd met her. Not because anything bad happened. Because everything was good. Too good. The kind of good that makes you painfully aware it might end. Lillian and I spent more time together than ever. Coffee before work. Walks with Buddy after dinner. Long conversations on her porch that somehow stretched past midnight. The closer Portland got, the more normal everything felt. And that was the problem. Because I was getting used to her. Getting used to seeing her smile. Getting used to her messages. Getting used to Buddy scratching at my door every Saturday morning because he somehow knew I was home. Getting used to a life that might disappear in a matter of days. One evening, about a week before her move, I stopped by unexpectedly. Her SUV was parked outside. The porch light was on, but something felt off. Buddy didn't come running. That alone was enough to worry me. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. Still nothing. Then I heard a voice inside. Come in. It was Lillian. I opened the door. She was sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by boxes. Buddy lying beside her. The television off. The lights dim. She looked exhausted. Not physically. Emotionally. The kind of exhaustion sleep can't fix. You okay? She smiled weakly. Not really. I sat beside her. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then she handed me a piece of paper. I looked down. Plane ticket. Portland. Departure Monday. 5 days away. My stomach dropped. 5 days. Seeing it in writing somehow made it real. I bought it months ago, she said quietly. I nodded. The room felt strangely cold. Buddy lifted his head and rested it on my leg, as if he sensed exactly what was happening. Everyone keeps telling me how lucky I am. You are. I know. They're right. I know. Her voice cracked, and suddenly tears appeared in her eyes. Not dramatic tears. Not movie tears. Real ones. The kind people try to hide. I just wish it didn't hurt this much. My chest tightened, because I wanted to tell her not to go. I wanted to tell her to stay. I wanted to tell her exactly how I felt. But what right did I have? She'd spent years earning this opportunity. Years. Who was I to stand in the way? So instead I said the only honest thing I could. I'm going to miss you. Lillian looked at me. Really looked at me. And for a second neither of us looked away. Then she whispered, I'm going to miss you too. That night I barely slept. Every possible outcome played through my head. Tell her. Don't tell her. Let her leave. Fight for her. Move on. Stay quiet. The problem wasn't that I didn't know what I felt. The problem was that I knew exactly what I felt. And it terrified me. 2 days before her flight, Buddy disappeared. Again. I got the call just after lunch. Lillian sounded panicked. He's gone. I stood up immediately. What happened? I opened the gate for 2 seconds. Okay. He ran. Which direction? I don't know. I was already grabbing my keys. Stay where you are. For the next 4 hours we searched. Parks, trails, neighborhood streets, every place Buddy liked. Nothing. As evening approached, panic started creeping in. Not because Buddy usually wandered. Because he didn't. Not anymore. And the closer it got to dark, the more worried we became. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered immediately. Hello. Are you looking for a golden retriever? Relief hit me so hard I nearly laughed. Yes. He's sitting outside the old train station. The old train station. A place on the edge of town that almost nobody visited anymore. I thanked the caller and immediately drove there. When I arrived, Buddy was exactly where the man said he'd be. Sitting calmly. Waiting. As if he'd planned the whole thing. I got out of the truck. Buddy. His tail wagged. But he didn't move. I walked closer. Then stopped. Because suddenly I understood. This wasn't where Buddy wanted to be. This was where he wanted us to be. The old station overlooked the river. And years ago it had been one of the most beautiful spots in town. The kind of place people brought someone special. A few minutes later Lillian's SUV pulled in. She jumped out before the engine stopped. The second Buddy saw her, he ran forward. She wrapped her arms around him. Relief flooding her face. Then she looked at me. And for some reason neither of us could stop smiling. The sunset painted the sky gold behind her. The river reflected the light. And everything suddenly felt painfully temporary. Because in 48 hours she would be gone. And we both knew it. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The river moved quietly below us. The sunset slowly disappeared behind the hills. and Buddy sat between us like a referee, making sure neither of us ran away. Lillian scratched behind his ears. You scared 10 years off my life. Buddy seemed completely unapologetic. He's lucky he's cute, I said. He knows. We both laughed. Then the laughter faded, and silence returned. Not uncomfortable silence. The dangerous kind. The kind where both people are thinking the same thing but neither wants to say it first. Lillian looked toward the river. 2 days. My stomach tightened. Yeah. I keep counting. I know. She looked down. I thought it would get easier. It didn't. A sad smile appeared. It got worse. That answer hit harder than I expected. Because it sounded exactly like something I would have said. Buddy stood up suddenly. Then walked toward a weathered wooden bench overlooking the water. He stopped beside it. Waiting. I shook my head. I swear he plans this stuff. Lillian laughed softly. At this point, I'm starting to believe it. We sat down. Buddy immediately settled at our feet. Mission accomplished. For several minutes we watched the river. Cars passed in the distance. Birds crossed the sky. The world continued moving, completely unaware that mine felt stuck. Then Lillian spoke. Can I tell you something? Of course. She took a deep breath. When Buddy disappeared the first time, I looked at her. I wasn't sleeping. Her voice was quiet, almost fragile. I'd spend hours sitting by the window waiting for him to come home. I remembered the way she'd sounded on the phone. The exhaustion. The fear. It wasn't just because I loved him. I stayed silent, letting her continue. He was the last thing that still felt connected to my old life. Buddy lifted his head, as if he understood his name. When my mom died, the house became quiet. She swallowed hard. Too quiet. I felt my chest tighten. Then Buddy disappeared. A tear rolled down her cheek. She wiped it away immediately. I think I was more scared of being alone than I was of losing the dog. For a second I couldn't breathe, because I knew exactly what she meant. Loneliness wasn't always being by yourself. Sometimes it was going home and realizing nobody was waiting for you. Nobody asking how your day was. Nobody noticing if you came home late, or didn't come home at all. I looked at her, really looked at her, and suddenly all the reasons I'd stayed quiet felt stupid. All the excuses, all the fear, all the logic. 48 hours. That was all we had left. 48 hours. Then she would leave. Maybe forever. I took a breath. Then another. Lillian. She turned toward me. My heart hammered in my chest. There was no perfect way to say it. No clever speech. No movie moment. Just the truth. You changed my life. Her eyes widened slightly. I continued before courage could disappear. When I found Buddy, I thought I was helping a lost dog. A small smile touched her lips. But somewhere along the way, I laughed nervously. I think he was helping me. Neither of us looked away. The world seemed to disappear. Just for a moment. The river. The sunset. Everything. You make every day better, I said quietly. And I don't want to pretend that losing you won't hurt. A tear slid down her cheek. She didn't wipe this one away. I don't want you to go. The words finally existed. Out in the open. No taking them back. No hiding. For a second she just stared at me. Then she laughed through her tears. A beautiful, shaky laugh. You have any idea how long I've been waiting for you to say that? I blinked. What? She shook her head. Garrett. I've been hoping you'd say that for weeks. My brain stopped functioning. Completely. Seriously. Seriously. Buddy barked. Loudly. Almost impatiently. Like he couldn't believe how slow humans were. And for the first time in weeks, both of us laughed without sadness behind it. The problem was, Portland was still 48 hours away. For the first time since meeting Lillian, hope felt more dangerous than fear. Because fear protects you. Hope makes promises. And promises can break your heart. We stayed at the train station until the stars appeared. Neither of us wanted to leave. Neither of us said it. But we both knew. Every minute mattered now. When I finally drove home that night, I felt lighter than I had in years. And somehow more terrified than ever. Because now I knew how she felt. And now she knew how I felt. but Portland was still waiting. The next day was Saturday. Lillian's flight was Monday morning, less than 48 hours away. I woke up determined not to waste them. At 9 o'clock, I was standing on her porch holding 2 coffees. Buddy spotted me through the window and immediately started losing his mind. The front door opened. Lillian laughed. "Did you bribe him again?" "I brought coffee." "That's not an answer." "It absolutely is." She stepped aside. "Come in." For the first time, nothing felt uncertain. No guessing. No wondering. No pretending. When our hands touched, neither of us pulled away. When our eyes met, neither of us looked elsewhere. The walls we'd spent weeks carefully maintaining were gone. And honestly, it was a relief. That afternoon we packed boxes together. Again. Except this time everything felt different. Because every box sealed felt like a countdown. Every piece of tape sounded like a clock. Buddy seemed to notice it too. He followed Lillian constantly, watching her, staying close, as if he knew something was changing. Late in the afternoon, I carried another box into the garage, then froze. Lillian was standing beside the moving truck, staring at it. Not moving, not speaking, just staring. I walked over. "You okay?" She nodded, then immediately shook her head. "No." That honesty broke my heart. She looked at the truck. "I wanted this for so long." "I know. I spent years dreaming about it." "I know." Her eyes filled again. "But now all I can think about is what I'm leaving behind." This time I didn't stay quiet. This time I stepped closer and took her hand. "Then maybe that's your answer." She looked at me, confused. "What if it's not? What if I regret staying?" I understood the fear, because I had my own. What if she left? What if she stayed and resented it later? What if we were both making a mistake? There were no guarantees. There never are. I squeezed her hand. "Lillian." She waited. "You don't owe me your future." A tear slipped down her cheek. "You don't owe me your dream job." Another tear. "But if you're asking yourself whether you're running towards something," I looked into her eyes. "Or away from something." Her breath caught. "You already know the answer." That night neither of us slept much. We talked. For hours. On her porch. Under the stars. About everything. Our fears. Our mistakes. The lives we'd imagined. The lives we'd actually lived. At some point after midnight, Buddy fell asleep between our chairs, snoring loudly, completely unconcerned about human drama. Lucky dog. Sunday arrived. Then Sunday afternoon. Then Sunday evening. And suddenly there were only hours left. The truck was loaded. The house looked emptier than I'd ever seen it. Lillian stood in the living room surrounded by echoes. Buddy sat beside her, quiet, watching. I hated every second of it. Because no matter how much we cared about each other, the decision still belonged to her. And I had no idea what she was going to choose. At 6 that evening, she looked at her watch, then at me, then at the moving truck outside, and finally whispered, "I need to make a decision." My heart stopped, because one way or another, everything was about to change. Lillian stood in the center of the room, silent. The house around her no longer looked like a home. The pictures were gone. The bookshelves were empty. Most of the furniture had already been loaded into the truck. Only a few boxes remained. And Buddy sat beside her, watching, waiting. I couldn't remember ever feeling so helpless. Because for the first time since meeting her, there was nothing left for me to do. No speech. No grand gesture. No clever words. The choice belonged to her. And only her. She looked toward the window. The moving truck sat in the driveway. Ready. One signature. One drive. One flight. And this chapter of her life would be over. Lillian closed her eyes. For a long moment nobody moved. Then she exhaled slowly and walked outside. My stomach twisted. I followed. Buddy followed both of us. The evening sun hung low over the neighborhood. Everything looked strangely normal. Children riding bicycles. Neighbors mowing lawns. People walking dogs. The world kept moving, completely unaware that my future might be disappearing in front of me. Lillian stopped beside the truck, staring at it. The driver stepped out, clipboard in hand. Everything ready? Lillian looked at him, then at the truck, then at me. My heart pounded. The driver smiled politely. You heading to Portland tomorrow? For a second I thought she would say yes. She opened her mouth, paused, looked down at Buddy. The dog stared back, tail moving slowly. Then she looked at me again, and suddenly I saw it. The answer. She'd known it for days, maybe weeks. She just hadn't been ready to admit it. A tear rolled down her cheek. Then another. The driver waited, confused. Lillian laughed softly through her tears, then shook her head. No. The driver blinked. No. She smiled. A real smile. The biggest one I'd ever seen. I'm not going. For a second my brain stopped working. Completely. The driver looked even more confused than I was. You're not moving? Lillian wiped her eyes. No. What about the job? I already called them. My heart skipped. You called them? She turned toward me. I called them this morning. I stared. You already knew? She nodded. I think I did. Buddy barked loudly, almost triumphantly. The driver shrugged. Well. He looked at the truck, then at us, then smiled. Guess that saves me a long drive. A few minutes later he was gone. The truck disappeared around the corner, and with it went weeks of fear, weeks of uncertainty, weeks of pretending. The street became quiet again. Lillian stood there watching the empty road, then looked at me. I probably just made the craziest decision of my life. I smiled. Good. She laughed. Good. Yeah. Why? I stepped closer. Because there was no reason not to anymore. Because I was about to do something even crazier. Her eyebrows lifted. Oh really? Yeah. What? I took a breath, then smiled. I was seriously considering following you to Portland. Lillian burst out laughing. The kind of laugh that makes it impossible not to join in. You would have moved to Portland? For you. I shrugged. Probably. She shook her head. That's ridiculous. Agreed. Completely ridiculous. Absolutely. She stepped closer. Close enough that neither of us needed to raise our voices. Then she smiled. The same smile that had been making my life complicated for weeks. And finally kissed me. Buddy immediately barked. Twice. Very loudly. As if he felt left out. We both laughed. Lillian crouched beside him. Let's be honest. Buddy tilted his head. She scratched behind his ears. This was your plan the whole time, wasn't it? His tail slammed against the ground. Fast. Happy. Victorious. Pointed at him. He absolutely planned this. Lillian nodded. I know. For the first time in years, the future didn't feel empty. It didn't feel lonely. It didn't feel like something I had to survive. It felt like something I wanted to reach. A few months later, Lillian accepted a remote position with the same company. She stayed. Buddy remained completely convinced that he deserved credit for everything. And honestly, he probably did. Because the truth was simple. The night I found Buddy, I thought I had rescued a lost dog. What I didn't know was that he was about to rescue me too.